Hey everybody, this is Ian Zumback and we're broadcasting live from Nashville, Tennessee, and just want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's an exciting night. We're coming around the table, basically, metaphorically speaking, to speak about an album that I recently released called The Table through Old Bear Records, and we've been really excited at the response and how it's been resonating with listeners and how people have been able to engage with the gospel of Jesus Christ through it. And so I've invited some friends tonight to come and to share their thoughts on it. They weren't involved in the creative process, but are respected creatives themselves and music curators and pastors, and so it's a real blessing to have them here and speak into the album and ask me some questions tonight. I just want to share just for a few minutes about what the creative process was like as people are starting to tune in. This album was a labor of love. We worked on it for probably close to 2 years. It was produced by Chris Hoisington from the band The Brothers McClurg, and it was put out through Old Bear Records, and the entire community made that record possible. It was really a group effort. And I'll tell you, I've told a lot of people that if there was one piece of art or one piece of music that I've left, and it was the only thing I did and wouldn't change anything about it, that would be this album. I just couldn't be more satisfied with how it's come out, the song selection, the lyrical content, the community vibe to it, and how it came together. It was recorded in Batavia, New York at a studio called Old Bear Studio. And if you don't know the history behind the label initially started out as a studio. And it's sort of a community of Christian creative misfits that seem to incline towards music that's left of center and somewhat alternative, but have a voice to add to the current narrative and conversation in Christian music. And so I'm really glad to be a part of that community and be able to champion their efforts as well. So if you haven't engaged with the album yet, it is available right now on all your major digital platforms, from iTunes to Spotify to Apple Music. We're going to be going on the road in about a week and start touring in support of it. And I'll have these with me, some physical copies with me. And really excited about the way that came out too. So if you're at the shows, come see us. Love to have it. Anybody that supported the campaign through Indiegogo to make the record production possible, then you'll be getting yours in the mail pretty soon here. So having said all that, as people are tuning in, I just want to start introducing some of my friends that I've invited to come and participate in this special night. I'm going to first introduce my friend Curtis Parks. And for people that don't know Curtis is a good friend of mine, incredible human being, loves the Lord, has a passion for people and serving. I got to meet Curtis in a festival called Kingdom Bound. So Curtis, do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, it was awesome to meet Ian this past summer. We were both playing at the worship tent at Kingdom Bound up in Buffalo, New York area. And then I actually moved down here to Nashville about 7 months ago to begin a journey of planting a church. And when you're in that journey, you're always looking for just like-minded people that love connecting with people through community and the gospel. And Ian is right in that vein. And I don't think I've met many people that are just more genuine and just, you could tell you put your heart out there, whether it's just through a conversation over a meal or like recording a song and writing a song. And so it's just been really cool to get to know you over these last 7 months and see this process come to fruition with the record releasing, and love it. Glad to be here. And thanks for tuning in tonight.
All right. Thanks, Curtis, for being here. And so the next person I want to introduce is a friend, Daniel Doss. He's a worship leader, staff songwriter for Word, and a good buddy. We've written some songs together. And why don't you share a little bit about yourself, your ministry?
Yeah, man. Well, I remember a meeting, and we were scheduled to write. We'd never met before. Okay. And then we sit down and get to start talking, and the song comes out, and we're both just like, wow, it was a fun process. We had to write again, so that was a blast. You know, I live in the Nashville area. I'm from West Tennessee originally, live in Clarksville. It's just right up the road from here. And I lead worship at a church in Murfreesboro called New Vision Baptist Church, and I've been there almost a year now. But I just travel and lead worship different places, all right. And I have a wife of 18 years. We've been married 18 years this May. And we got married in year 2000. So I could always remember how many years we've been married.
That's a smart way to do it.
That was strategery on my part. So 18 years this year, and we have 2 little boys. And yes, we're just loving life, trying to enjoy the moment, and yeah, excited to be here.
Man,
this
thanks.
is so cool, man.
It is cool.
I love the record, dude. I'm so excited to talk about it tonight.
Thanks, man. I gotta say, I gotta thank Daniel. Daniel was an answered prayer too, and just having this come together tonight. He was actually the person that helped put this thing together with Emphasis Films and be the connect guy. So thanks for that too. So the next person I want to introduce is my good buddy Joel Russo. I'd be remiss not to share. So tonight is the kickoff of the Winter Olympics, and if you've been seeing the advertising on the Winter Olympics tonight, the band that Joel plays with, Carrollton, their song is actually the song that's been the theme song for the Winter Olympics, called "Made for This." So that's been super awesome to see that, and so, man, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Joel. As Ian said, I do play in the band Carrollton, and Ian and I got to know each other about a little over 3 years ago, and we both moved down from the Northeast pretty much the same month, I think. It was right around the same time, and so that's kind of how we knew each other, and we had a lot of mutual friends because of that, and we started writing songs kind of right away, and over the years we've written a bunch of songs that are kind of all over the place, and it's always something different, always turning over new leaves with each other as songwriters, but and so I'm just happy to be here, and I've been talking with Ian about the album over the past few months, and so listened to it a few times, and so glad to be here, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks, Joel, for being here. And then I'm gonna also introduce remotely from Orange County our good friend Jeremy Armstrong. I'm really excited to have Jeremy joining us tonight. I have a lot of respect for Jeremy as an author, music curator, and just a guy who's been around a lot of different seasons in worship music. So I'm really blessed and humbled that he'd make the time to be a part of tonight. So thanks, Jeremy. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Hey, Ian, thank you so much. Honored to be here. I don't know if you remember, but it was a couple years back, I was the editor for Worship Leader magazine for over a decade, and we do these wonderful conferences. And at one of them, I was meeting with Chris Hoisington from Brothers McClurg, and he said, "Hey, man, I've got to play you this song." Are we having technical difficulties? Because everyone's looking to the left.
No, we're good. No, we're good.
All right. So are you unidentified flying object out there?
It was like somebody commented, and it just grabbed our attention. We weren't ready for it, so but we're good now.
Somebody said nice
Joel.
beard.
Yeah, somebody said nice beard, and we were trying to figure out.
I was like, thank you. And went, wait, is he talking about that guy?
Nice beard.
I was probably talking about Joel. He definitely wins the beard.
Absolutely.
That's
I heard you guys all have the same car out there too. What's going on?
Yeah.
Beards and similar cars.
True.
Anyway, Ian, and he pulled me aside at the conference. And he said, "You've got to hear this song." And we got into my rental car, and he's like, "You got to turn it up louder, whatever speakers we had in there." And it was "Murderer Messenger," and that it impacted me immediately. That song did. And we'll talk more about that later on. But my passion in life is for a long time I was dissatisfied with Christian music and how there's a lot of similarities out there, and I wasn't super stoked on it. But I believe so much that the message of Jesus Christ needs a good song. That's what I do, and that's why I'm interested in you. That's why I'm interested in the guys in this room, because there is powerful music being made today. You're one of them. The Brothers McClurg, Old Bear Records are producing this stuff. And I'm just honored to be here to help shine a light, to ask my questions. There's awesome music being made, quality music being made. and we got to spread the word. That's so. Thank you for having me.
Man, thank you for that, Jeremy. Appreciate that so much. So, so if you're just tuning in right now, guys, we're just going to be talking about the table tonight, and we're going to open up some Q&A later in the Facebook Live. And so we just want to thank you again for tuning in. We just introed these guys, and we'll get to know them a little bit better as we continue with the broadcast tonight. But we're going to turn over the, I guess, the Q&A internally here. And I guess, Joel, you want to start us off, I guess?
Sure. Yeah. All right. Don't screw this up, Joel. Yeah. So
icebreaker.
Pressure is on. Come on, Joel.
yeah. Okay.
By the way, I mean, I feel like I'm in like this like throne. Does this look like kind of funny?
I'm in the same chair.
Ian.
I'm in the same.
Very fitting. We're your loyal
We're the
subjects.
minions. We're the
your
minions on the
minions.
black
No.
Your subjects.
Give us a pearl of wisdom. Yeah. So one of the things that so the first thing I heard off of this was "Murderer Messenger," and you had sent it to me. I think we were recording or writing or something in town, and I just listened to it on my phone. I think
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that I think that was a real that really struck me about it was knowing you and like knowing you for the past few years and knowing the other stuff that you had put out, knowing the other stuff that you were working on, that it was just like not a 180 because that would make it sound like the other stuff wasn't good, but it just in style it was a complete departure from like the stuff that you had released at that point, which was a little more like polished or like I don't know. It just sounded like a big nice record, like and the songs, they kind of did what you expected them to do, and it was like and it was like, yeah, here's Ian's record, and then I heard this one, and I was like, oh wow, this is like different, this is like, man, this is like I had no idea that you were kind of cooking that up, so I wanted to know like what kind of caused that transformation, because if anyone was listening to your last thing that you put out and then this. There's clearly like it sounds like some crazy stuff happened to you.
Yeah.
And then and then you've dealt with it, musically. Yes, that you've been musically transformed. But what made you decide to kind of switch it up in that way?
That's a really good question. It's kind of a combination, I'd say, of a lot of things. Some of it, I think for any creative that's developing music and writing music, I think there's always this like desire to kind of like find your voice in music in a way, and as you're in and around certain scenes and have different musical influences, there's times where I think you think that you're supposed to be doing a certain sound, because like I guess I would equate it to this. It's like if I really loved to play baseball, but I thought that my dad wanted me to play football, then I might go play football. And when I looked at my relationship to God and what I'd come to know contemporary worship music to be, I thought that God might want me to play football, but I really liked baseball instead, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So really what had happened, I think it was a combination of just like taking a look at the previous EP, which I was very thankful to have, and I thought it was greatly produced, and very thankful for Daniel Ornelas producing that record with me, and it seemed like it definitely resonated with some people. But I think life experiences and almost having a permission from other people to explore new avenues sonically probably led to me embarking on initially going ahead and writing that song. And it was just one of those songs that we were mining for. I wrote it with Jessica Crawford, and really, literally just at one point in time during the writing process said, I really feel like we need to just like literally let go of all of our preconceptions about how this song should be, and just open my heart up and just say what I would say if I was the hardcore kid coming out of the New York hardcore scene 15 years ago. How would I write a song? And so I just wrote from my heart, and bam, that first verse was written in 10 minutes. You know.
And I think, and kind of what I didn't remember to say as part of my question was that the whole album, it's continued on. So it's not just that one song, obviously. It's also like all 10, is it 10 songs?
Yes, 10 songs.
All 10 songs have that. None of them sound like cookie cutter or even like slick, or I would even say, or like overproduced, all these words that we have, to talk about stuff, that sounds like what's on the radio or whatever. Like everything sounds really like just heartfelt and like, yeah, it's got edges on it. Yeah.
Thanks. And that's actually, a lot of that production element came through hours of conversations with Chris Hoisington, where, Chris, I said, like, when I first started talking to him, he reminds me of Rick Rubin, like as a producer. And if you don't know who Rick Rubin is, he's a guy that like produced all kinds of different groups, from Run DMC to, I don't know, the Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Weezer.
all kinds of different people. But what I noticed about his style of production is that he never really interjected his own sound into the groups. What he did was he identified something in the artist, and he would just draw it out and lead them on this journey musically, and give them permission to like be themselves. And so I think Chris has a gift of being able to identify the artist and what is really in their heart, and give them permission in a loving, firm way that says, you should really explore that side of yourself. Because if I really look at the albums that influenced me, a lot of them were not polished, but very raw expressions that could range anywhere from, Jeff Buckley's Grace album all the way to Radiohead, OK Computer, just these different albums that were very sonically interesting, but very much the artists and their own sound. So I'm glad we went in that direction. So
Is there, can I jump in here on this?
Yeah,
You guys are obviously in Nashville. Is there a fear in the Christian artist world to branch out and go a little bit left of center? You know what I mean? Whereas it's Christian radio has a very, distinct, we know what it sounds like. Is there a fear in artists' hearts, or not? I mean, not to say that everyone's afraid of it, but why are there so many that go down the center and so few that follow kind of what you're talking about, just kind of saying, hey, what's true to my voicing? How do you feel about that?
Does anybody want to jump in on that?
I would say they like to eat. They like to have a roof over their head. I think that a big piece of that is you have certain fans and expectations from those fans, and you want to push it as a creative. You want to push the card, but as you exist to help to change lives. And if you don't connect, meet them where they are sonically or creatively, then you're going to be so far out in front of them that it's hard to meet them where they're at. I do believe that Christian radio has definitely, like you said, you described it really well. Just there's a certain sound they're looking for, and so even bands within the CCM world that you'd say, okay, they sound like this sound, or they're that genre. They all have their particular radio song that kind of would say, okay, we can put that on radio so they can get some exposure, so they can go tour, so they can create markets, so they can go tour as a band, and so they can eat and have a roof over their head, So I think it's fun what Ian has done and what Old Bear's done. I got a chance to go up to Old Bear back in December, and Chris said something that I've repeated to other people. He said, I want to make music that I want to listen to in 10 years. And I loved hearing that, because I thought, a lot of the sounds that we deal with whenever we're in writing rooms and producers are making sounds, it's very current. It's very, okay, this particular sound or this particular plug-in or this particular thing, that's what people are listening for. I mean,
Right.
I've produced things that they would say, hey, yeah, that really sounds a couple years ago. That was kind of, oh, you're using hand claps. That was really Taylor Swift. That was her old record. That was like 3 years ago. So it's a struggle being caught in the rat race of the current sound. What I really like, not to divert from the question, y'all can speak into the question, but it makes me think about, there's a song on your record, I think the Brother song, where the tom sound, the drum sounds, dude, that took me to the 70s. It was very nostalgic. I was like, that is so cool. And when I went up there to see the studio, I could see, all the little tools and things they would use to create that soundscape. And it was such a treat to be there. And having been in the studio that your record was produced in, I can kind of see as I'm hearing what's happening and all the different things they're using and how unorthodox it is. But anyway, sorry, Jeremy, didn't mean to divert. But back to what you're saying, I do think there's a fear. And I think the fear comes to when you do something different. I think the fear isn't just not being able to make a living as an artist, but I think the fear is also criticism from peers and also from those who are your fans. And so I think it's a challenge. Sometimes we're fear driven versus like creatively driven. It's a challenge to put yourself out there. So
Yeah.
Do you mind if I say something too?
Yeah.
So and I mean for what you're saying, Jeremy, too, and for me, I guess I don't have that fear because I've never had like a record deal with a major label or a publishing deal, you know, and so I've always kind of felt like I've got nothing to lose, and there's not like 10,000 people buying my records, so I'm not needing to serve that, you know, community of people that are like buying at that level that's going to support me financially, you know? And so, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is just like my personal situation. So I have to derive income other ways. And artistically, it kind of freed me up to explore. Like to me, it felt like, well, and I've always kind of had this bent in a way where I look at other artistic endeavors musically where somebody did something different and it was the thing that set the tone for the next 10 years. And so I feel like somebody's got to do that sometimes. I'm not saying that this is that project, but somebody's going to do something that's going to shift the paradigm musically somewhere. And I think, you know, there might be at this time, you know, in Christian music, maybe there's some people that want that and desire that. And it seems like people are resonating with that, at least on some level, with this project and some of the things that are being produced out of Old Bear. And so to that point, I guess for me, I just, when I talk about it, I had a conversation with a guy who ended up having one of the biggest songs in Christian music in like the early 2000s. And he ended up leaving the industry as a result of it because he kept on bringing the songs to the record label, and the record label was telling him it's not good enough. And so he had this like, I mean, as an artist, a lot of times we struggle with insecurities in a way, and the risks that come along with exposing yourself musically. But for him, it became so like debilitating that he literally left the band and stopped, you know, being in the industry for 10 years because he felt like my music's not good enough. But in having some distance from it, what he realized and the wisdom that he passed on to me, and one of the most wonderful things that have ever happened in Nashville to me was that he said, you know, what they did to me was like telling God, you know, that tree's not beautiful, but that tree's just different, you know? And so, but it makes up the whole, you know, painting of what God has painted, you know? And so everybody fits a specific thing. And if Christ has called us to be fishers of men, then everybody's a different fishing lure. And different fishing lures catch different fish. So, you know, maybe I'm a fishing lure that might catch some fish in a pond, you know, somewhere. And Joel is catching fish with a big net, you know, out in the sea, you know. Who knows? God knows. You know. So.
We'll see, yeah.
I think one of the interesting things, though, even kind of what Jeremy alluded to, is the idea of what you define as successful, you know. And I think one of the cool things that I really enjoy about your record is that you've matched accessibility with authenticity. You know, I think that's the key for any artist. It's like you want to be accessible to where, honestly, you want most people to hear it and be like, yeah, I can get into that. It speaks to me. But you also want to challenge people and leave them with something they didn't know before, or maybe something they haven't heard before. And I think the beautiful thing when you're able to match authenticity with accessibility, you have something that creates a spark, you know. And I wanted to ask you, I'm a lyrics guy. I love lyrics, and listening to this record, it almost sounds like a giant conversation. and it's unapologetically conversational. I mean, some of the ways that you spin lyrics, it's like you weren't trying to impress anybody, you're just trying to serve the song well. And personally, like, I think one of my favorite tunes on the record is Entertaining Angels. I love that chapter. I think it's Hebrews 13. And he just says, and the idea of being hospitable, because you don't know if you've entertained angels. You won't know that until the day where you're on the other side of eternity. But the idea of hospitality kind of seems to be a theme from even the idea of the table. And sometimes we don't realize, like, the word hospitable has table in it. And you usually have, that's a mind-blowing thing. It's hospi and table put together. But the idea that I think one of the most influential, I'm a big reader. So one of the big books that has been a massive influence on my life is this book by Leonard Sweet called From Tablet to Table. And he talks about basically the disintegration of the value of the table, sharing life and community around it. And it seems to be that's kind of one of your themes throughout the record, that raw vulnerability that comes with community over a table. So what was the lyrical process of really telling a journey that may have started, it sounds like, with Murderer, a Messenger. So what was the lyric process like in telling that?
Yeah, a lot of it was, I realized, like, through the process of it, that it was an overflow of my life and an overflow of the heart, you know. And Chris is incredible at providing ideas too. I mean, he just spitballs ideas, and he'll send stuff to you and say, "What if we wrote a song about this?" And I'd sit with it sometimes, or I'd bring something to the forefront as an idea, and we'd sit with it for 24 hours and say, "Does this fit the narrative of what we're trying to say?" So the lyrical process, a lot of it would start with either a song lyric or a name of a song, or just a scripture. You know, this is something that's. Wouldn't it be cool if we wrote about, for example, in Entertaining Angels? That was a Chris idea. You know, he had heard a sermon, and he was like, "What a great idea to think about who it is that we're encountering. You know, who we're meeting on a day-to-day basis, and using it as a call to action and serve." A lot of the albums as a discipleship resource. You know, we want to teach the Bible through the songs. You know, and speak into what it means to journey as a Christian, and hopefully elicit response in the lives of the people that are listening to it, to maybe on that day go out and say, "I want to serve somebody today." You know, maybe I'll just be reminded as I'm driving down the road. Actually, at Kingdom Bound, for example, a friend, Pastor John Keller, who was serving in the worship tent, he had a situation where there was a lady after the service that night who needed to be helped onto a wheelchair and then to a cart and driven about a mile down the road, and he was exhausted, tired. But he heard us sing that song that night, and somehow God used it to inspire him to like, okay, you know, I remember what those lyrics said, and you know what, God, you'd have me serve this person. And you know what, when he got in that cart with her, they drove, and she started explaining to him that she had just been diagnosed with a terminal cancer. Wow. He had the opportunity to just love her and pray with her, and so it's just the kingdom of God at work, and so we're just doing our part. And so that was always in the back of our mind. Like to Daniel's point, what he said, you know, is this something that's going to inspire others to walk out their faith and connect with them and serve people, you know, in their personal relationship with God, and how they walk out their faith. And so that was always also in the, I don't want to just say something just to say it or to sound clever, because you can't be clever and make Jesus beautiful at the same time. It's just not possible, you know, because then it just puts the cleverness back on you. And so to what purpose are we serving people in the lyrical content? So we were very deliberate about every word, you know, and everything that we were saying, because we didn't want to mislead, but we also wanted to speak faith and life and blessing into the lives of people and inspire them.
It
to
really
faith.
Comes across, like, I'm thinking of kind of, as you're talking, I'm kind of going through some of the other songs, and like, I think that thread goes through all of them as well, that idea of like being able to point at every one of the songs as something that you can kind of think of and can and might even, as you're kind of meditating on those lyrics, like might inform your day, or like maybe change how you might respond to a situation. Thinking about brother to brother,
Brother, yeah.
and or entertaining angels, or a lot of them are about relationships and and kind of how we talk to each other, and how we see each other, and how and how what it means to be a good friend, to someone else. And so what you're saying, I think that I'm totally now I'm making connections in my head, and I'm like, no. I think that totally comes across, I think, through the whole album, like all the songs are like that.
Can I ask you a question then on the other side of that? Another thread that is flowing through, and it also kind of speaks to Curtis a little bit with the authenticity. Something that's, I think, a lot of people are pushed away at church and with Christians and faith is when they see when we believe we're supposed to be happy all the time, where they see that or that they perceive that, but then you get your record and the first song starts with down in my soul, right? That's the name of it. And you've got a recording on there. It's like, oh, whoa, okay. So we're not hiding despair with this record. Can you speak a little bit to me? Number one, I kind of want to know if there's a story to that recording.
Sure.
And then, secondly, why is it that you almost found it important for us to dance with our shadow selves in some ways, to make it available in a Christian, I would call it a worship record. Why was that important to you, and kind of what's your solution for some of that despair that we do find throughout the record?
Yeah. Well, just to take the first part, so the story behind the recording of that, or the very first 30 seconds of it or 40 seconds of it, it's actually a voicemail from my dad. And my dad had a few things happen in his personal life that were really difficult, really almost like earth-shattering situations. And we talk and pray together a lot, and he has a faith in Jesus, and he's walking that out. And while we were recording, we were already collecting voicemails to include on the album. And I had gotten back to Chris's house that night. I was staying with him and his wife, Susie, and I saw my dad had posted just a very raw, sort of depressed posting on Facebook. And I was concerned, so I reached out to him a few times. I didn't hear back. And then I called him the next morning, and we talked through what he was going through. And he had a much better perspective the next day and felt hopeful about some things that were already even turning around with his personal situation. But I just had this thought that occurred to me, whether it was my selfish self or whether it was God inspiring it. I just said, listen, we're collecting these voicemails. And I said, I don't want to exploit the pain that you're experiencing in your life.
Wow,
but
yeah.
I used to lead a recovery group, Celebrate Recovery meeting for a group called Real Hope Ministries in Glens Falls, New York. And
Is that drug and alcohol addictions? Is that what that is?
It is, yeah, and all kinds of other stuff, codependency, sexual addiction, all kinds of different things. And that was very formulative in my writing, actually, I think, and just the human experience of discipleship and engaging with people. And one thing I thought was so beautiful in those rooms was that when you realized that you weren't the only person feeling what you felt at that moment, and somehow you derive strength in a way from a shared suffering with another person, and then you can find hope together, praying for one another. And so I said to him, I said, would you consider praying about leaving me a voicemail, and you don't have to reconcile the fact that God is going to come through from you. I just want you to express what you're feeling, because it might be something that somebody might hear on the other end that it just might resonate with them. It might encourage them and inspire them to feel like, wow, I'm not alone. And so that's the story behind that. He said, I will do that. I think people could be helped. And so, it's already come forward that people have been helped as a result of that. I've been getting testimonies back of people that are like, that song just helped me through a difficult night. And so it's already bearing fruit as a result of his being brave enough to do that. But to your second point of your question, the reason that is important to me, not to shy away from the despair that exists in the human life. Some of it was just probably where I was at personally in my own life. You know, there's this, I think that there's difficulties that happen. If you're called to ministry, I mean, if you're walking through it and it's all roses, I don't know, I would just kind of like maybe brace up, because there's going to be some things, there's going to be some bumps in the road, there's going to be some things that come at you that are going to discourage you or disappoint you, or that you're going to have to walk through with the Lord and really lean on and rely on His provision of grace and His provisions of mercy and strength, and even His timing, because sometimes He just doesn't come through when you want Him to come through, but that's where you find His strength being perfected in weakness. So I didn't want to mislead people, you know, and provide them with a view of the gospel that was not true. I wanted to provide them with a very real, honest, vulnerable look at my own life, because I'm in every one of those songs, but also set up the gospel in a way as the entry point of that album being, I think Charles Spurgeon said that, you know, a diamond shines, a jeweler will bring out his most illustrious and beautiful diamond to a person that sells it, or to sell to a person, and he lays it against a black velvet, so he can show the shimmer, he can show the shine, he can show the beauty of that diamond. And I think that's the gospel, you know. Without the pain and suffering of the human experience that sets up this glorious hope that we have in Jesus Christ, then a lot of people maybe might just want the fast food version of Jesus, and might not press through the difficult times like it talks about in Mark 4. And, you know, and then the enemy comes and steals that seed that God planted in their hearts. So that's why it was important for me to share so honestly on the record.
Quickly then, as a follow-up, I love the production of that first song. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is there a vinyl needle scratching or something like that in that one? Is that part of it? Or there's just a lot of sounds going on, although there's a lot of space too. So can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Sure. So there are vinyl scratches on that song. Chris had this idea. He loves vinyl records, listens to them all the time, and he let one of his vinyl records play one night before we recorded, and the needle just kept on hitting the paper, and somehow his ear picked up the audio of that, and he had this creative idea to go ahead and to try to extract that sound and basically record it, and then record a bunch of LPs and then create drum sounds through these lo-fi scratch sounds on these vinyl records. And so you can hear those on Down to My Soul. You can hear them in most of the album that has any kind of percussion. There's like 40 LPs, and we probably drove the engineer Brian nuts, you know, because we'd spend 2 hours every session just extracting sounds. But I think the thing that's really cool about that too was that, like, Chris has like probably 2,000 or 3,000 vinyl albums, and he went and he selected a lot of old Christian albums that might not have had a lot of sales, you know, but were these like gems, and they were still finding like redemptive purpose and being repurposed to serve our album. So it was cool to have like old Phil Keaggy LPs, you know, or like old albums that I don't even know what the names of some of these things were, but they were really cool, like hippie Jesus like type LPs that were really neat.
Did you use any Carmen LPs?
I don't think so. I don't know if he's got that in his catalog. That would have to be a pretty deep
Because that would have
cut.
taken it to another level.
Yeah. Now, from just really quick, can we get technical?
Yeah.
Like, are most of these around the center of the record, like on the paper, or like where the needle runs out? Is that where the majority of the sounds came from?
Yeah, most of them did, unless some of those records were really worn in, and it'd skip on like a groove. So there's a song called "Promise Is a Promise" on there, which is the second track, and you'll hear this thing that almost sounds like like this real quick, like almost like a percussive. I don't even know what you call those things with the. But anyway, that was actually literally the needle got stuck in a groove, and it made this like quick like little. And somehow it was in time with the album, and so that's what we put on there. And it sounds like a percussive thing, but it's actually a vinyl record. But most of them were the needle hitting the paper.
Wow. I remember that was one of the things before I heard anything. You told me one of our many Mexican food lunches.
Yes. Yeah.
At like you said that you were doing this, and I didn't know what your album sounded like yet. So you were like, we're doing this thing with vinyl, and then like the needle is scratching, and we're turning it into a drum loop, and I was like, whoa. Like, I was like, how is this gonna work? And then I heard it, and I was like, oh, okay. It all made sense.
It did. It was a painstaking process, but I think it was
sure
just
it
like
was.
really
Yeah.
thankful.
It's really
thankful
cool.
with the way it came out and the way it sounded. And in fact, there's even a music documentary put out by Harmonized Sounds. If you go to harmonizedsounds.com, it shows what we did and how Chris did it and extracted the sounds and flew them into Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff. So
Cool.
so check that out. So
Chris is like a mad scientist.
man.
When we're working on a record, it's like he is like, you can tell he's like in a zone. You know, and he'll be like, do you have any ideas? Do you have any thoughts here? And I'm like, man, we're in a realm that I don't exist in. And it's like, I'm just kind of here enjoying the ride. And so I would have more questions about kind of what's going through his head, like what's, you know, here and there. So yeah, I can't imagine a full album working on that with him and Anthony and all them. I'm sure it was a blast. So they have an incredible team. You know, something that's unique about Old Bear is that it's like a team of people, you know. Throughout the day, we're working on the song I was up there for, like different people would come in, different musicians, and I'd be like, it was almost like a new palette of sounds, and it was just like amazing watching them work together. And, you know, when you have a team that, you know, they would be like, no, that's not right. You know, it's like usually in a studio down in Nashville, you got people that they don't always work together, and so they don't know how to talk to each other. But like up there, that you were like, these guys work together, because you'd have somebody that doesn't work in this area critique something that they're doing, and they had the comfort level enough. And I was like, man, this is a neat process. So I think Old Bear is really onto something up there. So Chris and Anthony, all of them were just, you know, they did a great work on this album. So I know it was a blast working with them.
It was.
I was going to ask you, there's one song on there, I think it's the last song. I'm a sucker for B-sides. And the last song, Manasseh, I have to be honest, I Googled it because I knew it was in the Bible, but I didn't want to appear ignorant. I guess I'm exposing myself now anyway, so that was pointless. But that was my favorite song. And it was my favorite song, like just with the sounds, but also thematically. I'd love for you to talk about that. But in the middle of it, there's a section where I was like, is that like a violin plucking? And it wasn't like these plucks that you would normally play. It was like a rhythm, and it was like a melody. It was just so unique. I loved it. And then later they brought the bow in and played a little bit, but it was just the coolest thing. I was just smiling the whole time. But just listening to that, there's a lot of depth there to the lyrics. I'd love for you to speak into, where did that come from? What was it about? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So on the song content side, I love the story of Joseph. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, because I think it's just personally encouraging to me. I think just when you're walking through life and life doesn't always pan out the way that you'd hope, there's a hope in that story that God can literally change your story overnight, and he did for him. And so it's always been a near and dear kind of story for me. And I always seem to gravitate towards the symbolism of Manasseh, in the sense that he represented God's faithfulness and he represented God's goodness. And if anybody's not aware of what the story of Manasseh is a name that Joseph gave his son as his firstborn, and the name means, you've made me forget the trouble I've seen, which is one of the lyrics in the song. And so, I feel like God at times allows us, like it says in Hebrews, to sort of walk through life seeing and realizing God's faithfulness and goodness through eyes of faith, not experiencing it entirely on this side of eternity, but knowing it's real. But then there are times where God gives something into your care that is a literal physical representation of his faithfulness and a reminder. And so here is this promise that Joseph felt in his heart, that God was going to be faithful to him. But then here he is holding the promise, and the promise is literally holding him back as an infant, And isn't that the grace of God? Isn't that Jesus Christ? The promise of his goodness and faithfulness holds us as we're holding on to it in this very reciprocal sort of relationship. So that's really what that song is about.
That's awesome.
You know, from the aesthetic and production side of it, one of my favorite, again talking about Rick Rubin, I guess, one of my favorite recordings that he's ever done are the later albums that he did with Johnny Cash. They just were very influential at a period of my life, and it was what I aspired to be in terms of like a cool musician and cool recording, because it was so raw. And Chris and I have talked about, it's like, man, it sounds like in certain takes, Johnny Cash doesn't even have the physical ability or wherewithal to even push through the lyric, and it seems like he's doing it with all of his might. And so we wanted to record some of the songs so it felt like we were like literally in a room with the listener, be that intimate and that close to them. And so from the aesthetic standpoint, it was so stripped down. It was definitely, and this is kind of a funny side note, and if Rick Lee James is watching, he'll probably appreciate this. And Joel definitely knows this about me. So I used to be a massive comic book fan when I was a kid, right? And I don't read comics anymore. I haven't in a long time, because I think that there's some content that can lead you to some pretty dark places. But I always loved Hugh Jackman's representation of the Wolverine character, right? And so before I even saw Logan, that movie came out while I was recording. And this is not a plug for that movie or anything. It's visceral, it's violent. Don't let your kids watch it. But I had heard about his going all out for that role, you know, and like just letting it all be left, you know. And that actually inspired me. Like when I sang that song particularly, I was thinking like, here's this guy who's given his life to his art. What if that's the last movie he ever made? How would he feel about that performance? And so that's how I approached that song. You know, it was literally like, if I died after this take, would I be thankful for what was recorded and left for people to hear? Because someday, I mean, not to be morbid or morose, you know, I want my children and my children's children to engage with, who was this man and why was his faith so important to him? And this is a snapshot and a portrait of that. They'll be able to see a preserved narrative and lyrical content that like is meaningful and might inspire their faith, you know. But those plucks, really cool. There's really cool. Sandra is part of the tribe at Old Bear. She came in and she was recording. She's just an amazing player. But somebody had the idea. I think it might have been Brian, the engineer, who's a producer in his own right, encouraged her to like do these plucks, these dissonant plucks, and then layer it so that we do it twice. And so that was probably a good hour of like composing and recording it in those moments.
It had to be a challenge to get those, you know, the timing.
And the harmonies.
The harmonies. I was like, wow, they're plucking in harmony now. I was like, that is so cool. So yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, thanks for
That was cool,
pointing
man.
it out.
Yeah. So when I first started to kind of sit down with the record, one of the things I noticed, which was very different, and I got to be honest with you, at first, I didn't love it.
Yeah.
Right. I thought it was a little strange that you had so many guest vocalists on the album.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think, you know, when I think of a singer-songwriter or like, you know, an artist that, you know, you're paying to hear them sing, but here I'm, you know, hearing these other people. You know, at first I was like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, there's a lot of them on there. And it looks like a rap CD because of all of the titles of the songs. Featuring, yeah. Dude. But as it kind of started to grow on me, and I started to really kind of love what that represents, which is that, you know, you've brought in these different people, and I know some of them are Old Bear artists and collaborators and stuff. I loved that. It ended up being one of these things where I'm like, I had to kind of think about it for a second, and I was like, oh wow, that I never would have thought of that, like being a solo artist and then having all these people sing second verses or third choruses or whatever. My question is, like, was that intentional? Did you think about that kind of in a big picture sense, or was that something that just kind of happened out of opportunity, you know, song by song basis?
It kind of was intentional, actually. Yeah. Once we recorded Murderer Messenger and the aesthetic and the vibe of that, it almost like initially I was inspired to even want to maybe do a like a combo record with Jessica actually,
Right.
like because it just felt so good in that song. But the more we started writing and realizing, okay, well here's the second song we wrote for it was actually The Table. So we thought, well, it would be kind of how are we going to resolve, David and Mephibosheth, how can that be, a male and a female lead duetting on that. So we started to see this organic process of like, well, we need two singers on these songs because a lot of the songs are conversations. And then it started to inspire invitation to community,
Right.
Like, okay, for example, Weston Skaggs did Brother to Brother.
Yeah.
And so, he played the part of Peter and I played the part of Paul in that song, So we tried to write a lot of the songs like conversationally.
There's a layer there, and then because of that, that wouldn't be there at all, where you have two people that are singing two sides of a conversation, And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And, to your rap point too, I mean, we do,
I always,
yeah. I mean, we kind of model our community after the Wu-Tang a little bit. So
yeah.
we're like, one gets in, then we're going to bring the rest
Of
in.
course.
So that's
Your entourage.
Yeah.
Dude, he's gonna bring you into a rap next record.
that's right.
I
Can you do
think
that?
of Ian as a rapper already, kind of. He hasn't,
Thug Life.
he's not ready to let you all in on it yet.
I did meet Lecrae actually, like in Nashville
Oh, yeah?
recently. That was pretty cool. Like I scared him actually. I was like driving down Germantown and picked him out like Lecrae, and he was like, I think he thought he was probably being jumped because I was just like so enthusiastic, but I just had to let him know, man, you're such a blessing to music.
That's great.
Listen to Lecrae. I love Christian hip hop, and this is probably a rabbit trail, but I love it because I feel like they are really honestly sharing the gospel unapologetically,
Totally.
and it's an encouragement to see people
Yeah,
doing that kind of art. So
Did you ever listen to Gospel Gangsters?
no,
I remember that.
this is probably
That-
pre-Christ.
I grew up on them, man.
You remember Grits?
Oh yeah, dude, they're great.
Yeah, man.
There's a guy out there right now named Stephen Malcolm who I've been able to work on, do some engineering, etc. stuff on his albums. But anyway, check him out. He's really good too.
Cool. Stephen Malcolm.
Okay, so I know that we want to take some questions pretty
Yeah,
soon. I don't know
yeah,
if that's
sure.
going to happen now, but
Yeah.
I really want you to speak. And we've all talked a little bit about Murderer Messenger, and as I said, that really influenced me. And also, I always, whenever I hear music and stuff like that from in a Christian context, I try to figure out or think of how it fits in a worship service. And you spoke of Johnny Cash, and there's Murderer Messenger. I'm like, man, this would kill at a prison ministry. I mean, this song would do so well there. But just tell me a little. And also, I interpreted it maybe falsely, but I interpreted the story of Paul. I put that into it. You can't really tell me I'm wrong because I'm allowed to.
That's right.
It's
in the
once you've
Bible.
released art,
right.
it's for us to interpret
That's
it.
right.
But could you tell me, like, was Paul in your mind when you were writing that song? What is the story behind it? I was super moved by it, and maybe just share a little bit of your heart behind that, what you're hoping to convey with that.
Sure. So that it was inspired by Paul in a lot of ways. It was part autobiographical, part autobiographical, and definitely a lot of Paul, because
Okay.
Paul's one of the most wonderful representations of a redeemed life being used for the impact and influence into the glory of Christ. And one of the things that really helped me tap into his story and what we were trying to convey in the message of the song was actually going back to leading worship at Celebrate Recovery. You'd find a lot of the times it took a lot for people to even believe that they were worthy of forgiveness. And then once you got them to that point where they meet the Spirit of God and God fills them with His love and they suddenly feel this weight and the burden of their sin lifted and they do feel free of it, then to bring that added component of, okay, well, guess what? Now he wants to actually use your life and actually go and to take the message of what He's done for you and share it with the world, because you can actually make a difference in the lives of others. and He actually wants to use you. And that's a really big hurdle actually in those rooms. And so I thought, man, well, if we're writing this song, this is sort of a Christian apologetics in a way that we can actually provide biblical content that shows and proves and educates and submits evidence that no sin is too great for people not to receive forgiveness, and then go ahead and take this message of the gospel into the world. And let's use Paul's life as an example, because Paul, by consent to the death of Stephen, was complicit in his murder. By consent was a murderer himself. And so we said, well, if God took this man and then God sent him into the Middle East and all these different areas to share what he did, and was admittedly the chief of sinners, then if he's able to use Paul in that way, he can surely use your life. If you're free of your drug addiction, or you're coming off of alcoholism, or maybe you've had a failed marriage, and that's behind you now, and you're working towards a new life, a new purpose, God can redeem so much. He can redeem so much. His grace is not that narrow. His grace is broader and more expansive than we give him credit for, and he's not intimidated by sin. And I think that one of the reasons why I can speak to that so personally is because when I encountered the Lord and my own personal testimony and the way I came to faith in Christ, I was met with a presence that was not intimidated by my sin. He wasn't intimidated by my past. And he even was inviting me not only into fellowship, but communicating that he actually had a purpose for me, that he wanted to send me out. And I had no preconception on what level of influence. If it was just send me into my marriage and bless and serve my wife and serve her and be a blessing to her and lead her in the faith, then that's enough, But that's, I guess, I hope that answers the question, as best as
Yeah, it
possible.
absolutely does. And I think it also even ties the whole record together in some ways, just because it puts the two aspects of everyone in the title and in the chorus. It's not that it's not the fact that he's a murderer is not erased. It's still part of it. And in fact, that's what's being used as his message. And I think that the two sides of humanity are well represented. I think not just two sides. There's so many more, but the table is kind of an answer to that. So I just thanks for putting those together, for presenting them in a way that really blesses people, I think.
Man, thank you. I appreciate you, writing about it too, as much as you did on Mike Christian Music. That was a huge blessing,
Yeah.
It really was. So thank you for that. So, man, if you guys have any more questions, or you going to open up the Q&A to the public?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so
I'm good.
Open it up.
Time, yeah.
You good? Open it up. Open up the borders. See, I knew I could fit it in somewhere. We're big fans of a rock band, and we've been trying to figure out a way to incorporate one of their songs or lyrics into it, so we just did. Fist bump.
Right on.
So, guys, if you're watching, we just want to take a few minutes and open up Q&A for you guys and see if you have any questions for myself or Jeremy or Curtis or Daniel or Joel. We're just going to open up the feed right now. And just to let you know, if you haven't actually engaged with the album yet, haven't listened to it yet, we've provided a link where you can go ahead and you can go check it out on iTunes. You can go check it out on Spotify or stream it, one of those places, and engage with it. So we're waiting. No.
while we're waiting, can I say something?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
We're in a new world of music where bands and artists create singles. It's single driven. So as a result, you get a record that sounds like a bunch of singles. This sounds like a record.
Yeah.
This sounds like something that you don't want to you want to sit down and you want to listen to it from start to finish, So just, boil a pot of tea or whatever, your drink of choice, and just sit down and listen. And because it is a conversation, it's something you want to just kind of soak in for a while. It's not like just go listen to this one particular song, but it's it's a whole piece of work. And it's like almost like with every song, you weren't trying to say everything you're trying to say in that one song. You just let it be what it was. You weren't trying to say everything, represent every artistic element of who you are, in that one thing. You would just let it lay out. It's very nicely done. And I do want to say this: if anybody from like United Way or like Compassion or World Vision is listening, Entertaining Angels. Every time I listen to that song, I'm like, dude, they need to use this song. That needs to be the Super Bowl song next year. Not the Olympics. You were on the Olympics, right?
Yeah,
right on. Yeah, a Super Bowl commercial. Sorry, I do that. I just kind of change feet in my mouth. I don't insert my foot. You know. Anyway, but yeah, so that should totally be like a commercial. Entertaining Angels. It's so nice.
Man,
Yeah.
Great too.
thanks, man.
Yeah, dude.
We had a
Appreciate that.
question. Who is your newest and bestest friend?
Where? Oh, I had it. Who's my newest and bestest friend?
That was the
That was it.
question.
Wow, that's.
Powerful.
I feel like a lot of pressure. My newest and bestest friend.
You have 3 people sitting here that
I
can,
know,
you
I mean-
And the West Coast is represented.
I know. These guys.
Don't leave me out, guys.
These guys are my newest and bestest friends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right,
It's an
appreciate
honor.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Man. Well,
I love what Daniel just said too. Like I love that that idea of like how it's not like you're putting everything into this one song or whatever. How it is totally like each of these songs has something really specific to say, and I love that. And I think as you're listening to it you can kind of let yourself get involved in it a little more instead of like instead of just like, oh, here's another song that's kind of like about whatever, maybe it's about something good, but with this one, it's every song has a very clear, the brother to brother is about, conflict. It's about, calling people out. It's about accepting criticism, That's not a song where you just like, you just you hear on the radio and you're like, oh, I love that, like.
Yeah, it's not a fist pumper.
Right, yeah.
Dude, I can't wait to forgive him.
Yeah,
You know?
or promise is a promise. It's about accountability. It's about it's about commitment, and yeah, I love that. I love that each song is such a real like nugget. But on their own, they're not. Together they make the whole picture.
You have to put out a dubstep remix record
man.
of all these tunes.
We're already on it.
Right,
Okay,
yeah, I mean,
okay.
we've been working on that
Nice.
a little bit. But I did see some questions. I want to say, hey, Chris Leader, thanks for the shout out. Chris owns Atlanta Fest with partner Teresa, and we'll be at that event this year. So if you're near the Atlanta area, make sure you go and get tickets for that event. But I saw Eric Lee Brumley. Eric had something that he asked. It looked like it was broken up. When should bands with enough experience know when to either label or management hunt? Danny, I think that's a great question. I mean, I'll speak to my piece, but then if you guys want to join in on that too, I think you guys can say that. Personally, Danny, I mean, my personal response to that would be is just focus on developing your songs and ministering to people live, and act as if you're going to be doing it the whole time yourself. I would say, like as an independent, be that passionate about it, be that passionate about developing it, and be very prayerful through the process, asking God to guide you every step of the way and connect you with people and partners. And I think that that's something that will happen organically and naturally. It's really hard to management hunt, label hunt, because a lot of times you'll find yourself knocking on doors that you think that you should be knocking, that God should open up for you, and it probably isn't where He wants you. I've very seldomly seen God open up a door for people that they thought was the best idea for them, because I think He really leads that process. And there are people that do make a way for themselves, I think, but then they get themselves in situations or contracts that actually burn them out. And so I would say hold it with a very open hand, be prayerful through the process. And literally what's happening here tonight, what you're seeing tonight, is a result of just holding things loosely, asking God to lead the process and bring in partners. I've prayed that very, very regularly for many years, and these guys are partners in the ministry that I have. And I'm thankful that God didn't answer the prayers that I prayed early on of asking specifically to be partnered with specific labels, because then I wouldn't have been able to experience and work with the people that He's brought into my life. So that would be my personal recommendation. You guys have anything to add to that?
You know, I think God is your greatest agent. He knows how he shaped you. He knows why he created you the way he did. And he knows what he's calling you to. So I would say step into that calling first and foremost. And really labels, producers, management, they're not looking for artistry, they're looking for momentum. And momentum is, what does your fan base look like? Are you already doing what you're called to do? Are you already, impacting lives? Do you already have a following on social media? Are you already selling records? Usually by the time you get to the point as a band that you don't need any of that is about the time they'll start asking to be your, label management, things like that. So you've already got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I would say, really quick because we got more questions.
Yeah,
like
question.
something that our band is on a label, and one thing that someone said something to our band a while ago, which really resonates, and we kind of give out as often as we can as an answer to that kind of question is, I forget who it was, but they said before the label, I felt like I was just digging a hole with my hands, and then all that a label was someone handed me a shovel. The fact is, I'm still the one who has to do the digging, and like a shovel is no good on its own. It's not going to take you to the next level. Yeah, I have a shovel now, right? But like if you're digging a hole, it's going to help you a lot, But you're going to have to be the one who's exerting yourself. You're the one who's going to have to be doing the work. You're going to have to be the one that has the vision in a way, to do what you're doing. So realize that it's a tool. That's what a label is. It's a tool. It's people that can help you out, but it's never going to be something that just all of a sudden fixes all your problems. Then you can just kind of sit in the passenger seat and let it happen. Like, I think if you ever feel that way, you're in for some disappointment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess Eric said one thing real quick. How long did it take to record the album? It took 2 years to write it, or a year to write it, but it took cumulatively about, I think, a total of about 3 to 4 weeks to actually record it. We had like about 2 weeks straight of recording it, and then came back to it twice to finish it up. And then it looked like there was another question about what's next. I guess what's next is we're going to be touring for the album a bit this year, doing some live events and getting out there and meeting people and ministering to people, doing some festivals. Chris and I are already talking about and planning for a project in 2019. We already have a concept for it. We've been praying through it. It'll be a very interesting concept, very relevant to my own personal life and personal experience, and obviously with how the gospel is integrated into that. But that's what's next for my ministry. So, Lord willing. So, I think it's written in the Bible, right? Right? James wrote about it. I don't want to make James angry here.
Who are we to make our plans? We're but a vapor.
Right.
So,
Let's get into Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, vanity of vanities.
Everything returns to dust.
That's right.
What's the point?
That's very positive and encouraging.
Listen to this record, though,
Yeah.
because it's honest.
It is.
It's really the lens of Ecclesiastes through the gospel.
Yeah, what Jeremy said earlier, I think, was something that I wanted to say myself too. If I could just echo him by saying, I love that was the first song, the song "Down in My Soul," and I love that that it doesn't shy away from that side of it. I think a lot of people, especially people, who are Christians, who are struggling with something, and trying to get through it, and they feel like they're really down. Sometimes the last thing they want to hear is like, "It's gonna be okay, just pray about it," or whatever,
right.
or "I'll pray for you," whatever. And that's great, but sometimes what they need to hear is, "Man, that's really tough. I've been there, and right now you're going through it, and just know that I know what it's like, and I feel for you." That can be sometimes the most powerful thing. And so, I love that it started off that way, and that it did. It doesn't necessarily get better by the end of the song. Even though it is about. Is it about the Good Samaritan?
It is about the Good Samaritan story, yeah.
But it's about before he gets there, before the Samaritan actually, arrives. And I think that's really cool.
It is. Well, we had a question from Eric Lee Brumley asked, and I think we can all answer this. He asked if we each could hang out with one secular artist for a day, who would it be? So I already have my answer, but I'm going to see if anybody else has answers first. Jeremy, you got one?
Oh my goodness! I think the Avett brothers are Christians, aren't they?
They are.
Who am I to judge, right? Those guys. I think Ryan Adams would be a pretty interesting hang as well. I don't know. Isn't he out there in Nashville with you guys? I'd probably go with the Avett brothers. Or do I have to choose one of them? Scott, seven?
I don't know.
Which
It's one artist, but two people.
Let's make this a more specific question. Which Avett brother?
Half of
Which
the
Steph or
AP
Scott?
Exactly. Which half? I want the cellist.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you, Curtis?
Man, I'm a big 80s fan. Still #1 preset on XM radio, 80s on 8. So I'd probably have to go with Huey Lewis.
Man.
You know?
He's a really interesting dude.
Just
Have you met
hang
him?
with the 80s.
No,
king,
I heard a long form interview with him, and he has a crazy story.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he just seems like he's had a crazy career, and I still listen to his songs all the time. So probably that guy. Somebody from the 80s for sure.
Exciting.
Oh man, I don't know.
You know, when I thought about it, immediately I thought, I really don't want to meet them because I want to keep liking their music. You know, it's like,
yeah.
I'm afraid like my understanding, the picture of them they've painted through their artistry, I'm afraid there might be a gap and, you know, so, but honestly, I would probably enjoy hanging out with John Mayer.
Oh yeah.
I might enjoy it. I would like to try to enjoy it, you know, but he's just a monster musician, you know, and I enjoy his shows, and so, yeah.
Yeah. Man, I don't know.
Justin Timberlake.
You know, I would. That's a great call. He hadn't crossed my mind yet. I think Justin Timberlake would probably be really interesting.
He's down at Spring Hill, man. He's like 45 minutes from here.
Yeah. And I think it seems like he's been getting into getting kind of outdoorsy, you know. And I have too over the past couple of years, so we might have that to talk about.
Man, did Michael Gomez set up that sale on that house? Michael, can you set that up for Joel if you're watching?
Michael, can you make me Justin Timberlake's neighbor?
His new best friend.
For me, it took me a second to think about. I was buying time, but I think I'd want to spend time with James Hetfield from Metallica.
Yeah.
And here's why. I mean, he was a big influence on me when I was a kid, but also I met him when I was like in 5th grade. I saw him, and I thought he was like iconic and bigger than life. And he like pretend punched me in the stomach like after the concert and was like, "You think that was an awesome concert, kid?" And I was like, "Yes, it was great." But I found out recently that he grew up in a very Christian like home apparently, and it like inspired him to, like, I guess like the rigid quality of his upbringing made him leave. But I would be interested in hearing that story and conversing about that, you know. I don't know if I'd win him over to the faith, but it would be interesting, you know, to talk things.
And you
faith.
punch him in the chest.
Yeah, that time. I think I don't know. I don't know if I could take him. My hand would probably incinerate.
It's just like a force field of metal.
That's inspiring. I think I might use that after like a worship set. You know, when I see the kids after the word, did you enjoy that worship? Yes. You know, and like threaten physical harm unless they're like, yes, it was great.
Right. You know, it's funny though, like kind of what Daniel was saying, like I feel like the more kind of like famous people that I meet, I feel like the less I feel that way, like, because you realize they're just normal people. So it's like, I want to hang out with the people that I know, because they're normal people too, you know, like, so like being famous, you realize like, it wears off pretty quickly, you know, like if you meet a famous person, you know, they're just people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess if there's no more questions, I wanted to take a few minutes to introduce your guys' ministries and just like give you guys the opportunity to talk about some things that God is doing in your lives and through your personal lives. I personally picked out a few things to suggest, and I'm not sure if you guys want to talk to those things, if you have other things going on, but I guess I'll start with Curtis. You've got two things that immediately came to mind. First, you've been working on new music, and so love to hear about that and introduce some folks to that. But also, God brought you from DC, you and your family, you've planted a church here, and you're killing it and getting ready to launch in September. Just could you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
Yeah, man, I'll give you the Facebook version. I won't go too deep, but man, my journey, 2005 to 2010, I was an artist, toured, nothing fancy, just a 40 Econoline van and a trailer, crashed a lot of couches, but that was a time of my life where I was just trying to be a famous rock star. And I was living for my name and for my fame. And 2009 had a major trajectory change, and I just remember literally meeting with a small group, and a small group leader said, "Hey, are you here to make your name famous or God's name famous?" And that question changed everything for me. Got back into worship. I had led worship as a kid, and so I moved to Washington, D.C. I was on staff at a church there for 7 years, and that was a church that had 8 campuses, and it was really cool to be a part of that. And then about a year ago, I wrote a book. And I tell people, my pastor wrote the foreword. His name's Mark Batterson, so at least that part's really good. But I wrote a book called Soundcheck about a year ago through David C. Cook, and it was a call to authenticity for worship leaders, worship teams, and it had me traveling on the road a lot, speaking and just kind of really charging people to not only live with purpose and excellence, but authenticity and being vulnerable, and not just flipping a switch when we go on stage to lead worship, but allowing God to penetrate the deepest parts of our life so that everything that we get to do on a platform is from the overflow of our lives. And so that was about a year ago, and I just felt like the Holy Spirit whispered to me. He said, "You're going to be doing this all the time, and you're going to do it in Nashville." And so I feel like God took me out of Nashville for a season and chipped away some of the not so awesome parts, and He really just instilled in me leadership and a heart to pastor people, and not just to lead songs, but to really lead people. And so I've come back here. My family and I moved back down to Nashville 7 months ago, and we're starting a church. It's called Bridges Nashville, and our vision starts and ends with the presence of God. We want to be a place where God's presence and His people connect, because for me, one moment in His presence can change everything. When you feel the realness of God and an encounter with Jesus, just like these songs, like an encounter with Jesus will leave you never the same. And so our church, the way that we'll do church is a new expression of the church. It's really just matching word and worship and combining it into one, and teaching the gospel through song. So we're going to have kind of a liturgy and music, and almost like VH1 storytellers, but with the gospel.
Cool.
And so that's kind of what we're doing right now. It's called Bridges Nashville. You can find out all about it, bridgesnashville.com. And if you know anybody in Nashville that doesn't have a faith family, we'd love to connect with those people. And then you alluded to a little bit of music.
Yeah.
I'm a songwriter, producer at heart, and so I didn't know any hymns until I was 21. The only hymn I knew growing up was Amazing Grace, and just from hearing it on the movies and stuff. So this later half of my life, I've become infatuated with hymns, and in fact, some of the songs that I've been able to kind of rework that have taken on kind of a life of its own in the global church has been some of the older hymns through the lens of somebody that didn't grow up with them. So kind of modernizing some of these. So yeah, I'm in the middle of a project called Hymn Like, and just taking some of the old hymns, Be Thou My Vision, Christ the Lord is Risen Today, even Crispin hymn like Joy to the World, and just kind of bringing them in from 300-400 years ago, plopping it into today, but still through that really organic lens, upright bass, mandolins, banjos, with some pop kind of vocals. So working on that. It should come out later this year.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
And I've had the opportunity to visit Bridges and be part of their vision nights, and just love your heart, love what's going on in the community there. There's actually a vision night this Sunday. It's meeting at, what's the name again?
Story Forge.
Story Forge. So go to their Instagram, check it out, and try to make it out if you're in the area and you want to see what's going on with Curtis and the ministry, and just be blessed. So thanks for being here tonight.
Thank
man.
you for having me,
Appreciate it.
man. Appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Daniel Doss. Man, there's so much going on. I mean, you've got worship leading, you've got Praise the King that was released. That's continually getting a lot of exposure. I know there's a lot of people up in New England that just reach out to me that love the project, and I've been blessed by the project. There's you did the Old Bear recording, and you just wrote with House Fires 2 days ago too. So I mean, you got a lot on your plate musically. Anything that you really want to share, promote out of all that stuff?
Man, I don't know. Honestly, I think my family is probably what I'm most like into right now. To be honest, we try to travel together. My wife and I have been married about 18 years, and I think I mentioned that earlier. And we have 2 little boys, and one of our mottos is "These are the good old days." And in about 15 years, they will have shot like arrows, and they'll be out of the house. Hopefully, if we did everything right, no offense to those who are still hanging out with mom and dad at school, but we're just trying to enjoy the season we're in. My issue for years has been to be looking to the future so much that I miss the present, or I let the frustrations of the moment supersede the joy of relationships and the richness of people I know around me that I'm in. And so there was an interesting revelation that came a few years ago where I would look back on seasons that I'd walked through where I was frustrated, but I would look back on the season with joy and be like, man, I really miss those guys. I really miss that. And I'm like, but wait, I was frustrated when I was in that season. And so I thought, what if I could learn to let the joy that I feel in the future, bring it into the now, and be like, there's going to be a day where I'm going to wish I was in this moment again. And so it helped me to cherish that. And even on tough days with with our family, things don't always go the right way. I'll look at my wife and be like, 20 years from now, we would give $1 million to relive this day, as bad as it is right now. We would want to come back and just cherish this. And so we're just trying to live in the moment. There's some really neat doors being opened up that we're excited about. Just the album, enjoyed doing that, working with some friends on that. Praise the King went well. If you listen to it, you'll hear a lot of just desire and passion for the church to rise up. And you mentioned the Old Bear thing. The song that we recorded there is a song that, it's not going to be on Christian radio ever. It's called Ichabod. That might be why the Manasseh, song really stuck out to me because of that Old Testament reference. But Ichabod is just basically a song of repentance for the church, just saying, hey, we have strayed. The glory of God has departed. And that's a story whenever, Eli, they lost the Ark of the Covenant. And one of Eli's daughter-in-law went into labor when her husband's died, and Eli died, and the Ark of the Covenant was lost, and that baby was named Ichabod. The glory has departed. And I've seen a lot of churches. I've been on staff at a lot of churches. I've traveled a lot of churches. And I get there, and it feels like the glory has departed. And we're missing that element of God's presence and appreciating, Him being with us. And so the song is a journey from Ichabod, admitting we are Ichabod. We are far from you. We've turned from you and your ways. But we want to be Emmanuel. We want to be the place where your glory dwells. We want to be God with us, not God's glory departed. And so I have a deep passion for churches to succeed. Had a similar thing as you, where we were in Nashville for a while. I was with the label, and we released a record, and then all of a sudden it just all crashed and burned. But God opened a door wide open to go up near Chicago to plant a church with a buddy of mine. And, I wouldn't trade anything for seeing that line of people lined up out of Lake Michigan to come be baptized and see lives changed in our midst. And God had to crush that dream of being an artist. And to be honest, I don't think I would have liked myself had we succeeded. I think God had to do, like you mentioned in your life, just some edge trimming to get me to where I needed to be as an individual so He could use me better, for His kingdom. So anyway, I'm passionate about the kingdom of God moving forward. I'm excited to hear about your church and what God is going to do there. And I just love hearing about churches succeeding and turning towards God and embracing all He has for them to move the kingdom in their region. So anyway, I don't know if I addressed anything that you mentioned.
Man.
I'm sorry. But anyway.
I'll tell you, I'm so blessed by what you said about just your family life. I mean, that's just awesome. That might be, for me, I knew, God does ministry even in and among these little things. And, that just so blessed me and just so inspired me. So, man, just thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, man.
God used you powerfully. So glad you're here.
Thanks,
so.
His album sounds good.
Yes, get it. And this
I've heard it.
It's funny. I remember the first time Daniel and I wrote together. I actually called Joel, or texted him actually, and said, "Hey man, I'm going to be writing with Daniel, and I think it's okay that I share this." I said, can you give me any tips on his writing style and stuff? I know you've written with him before, right? And what he said was, well, the only tip he gave me was just give yourself about 2 minutes to get past how good his voice is when he first starts singing, and then proceed from there. And he was right. As soon as this guy opened his mouth, it was just like, wow, what just happened?
That's funny.
So.
Well, thanks, man. That's nice of you to say. It's a little awkward. But
There's
thank you.
there's a few people like that in town where when you write with them, the first thing you write, they'll sing, and then you'll be like, "Wow, dang, that sounds good." And it might be a horrible line, but they sang it beautifully, you know.
Yeah.
That's
It was very much a compliment.
Well, thanks. It's nice of you to say.
Yeah. But, Joel, hey,
Ian,
let me see.
what do you got?
Well, we already covered the Olympics, but Carrollton, I've been listening to your record, and it's been blessing me. I mean, I love the honesty of it,
Sweet.
the worshipful quality of it, some of the organic qualities to it. There's been a lot of songs, especially the title track. It's been really speaking to me a lot as I listen to it.
Thanks.
And then there's the tour that's coming up with Zach Williams. I mean, so
Yeah.
I guess, and anything else you want to share?
Yep, Everything or Nothing by Carrollton. We just put it out on Centricity Records in, I think, September was our release date, and or October, and we're super, super proud of it. We produced a lot of the album ourselves, and so we really got to kind of be really, really intentional about what we put on there and how it comes across. So we love the songs, Everything or Nothing. The song Everything or Nothing is also maybe my favorite. And so we all really believe in the songs. And we're going on tour with Zach Williams starting, I think the first day is April 5th. And our last date with him, I think, is May 4th. So it's 1 month. So yeah, come see us if you live in Texas, Georgia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa. We're going to some other states too, but I forget. Arkansas. We're doing a whole weekend in Arkansas. But Zach's from Arkansas, so you probably already knew about it. And then other than that, I'm producing an album for my buddy Trent Monk and his wife Shelly. They have a group called We Are the Monks, and so we've been able to. When Trent and I have both been off the road at the same time over the last year, which is not many days, we've been working on this album, and so we're gearing up and trying to finish it over the next few weeks, month, and so hopefully that'll be out around April or so. But we're both really excited about it, and it's been really, really fun. So, yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks for being here tonight. Joel's one of my faithless friends. Faithless, that's not a word, is it? Most faithful friends, and I just appreciate his friendship so much. So thanks for being here.
You got it, man.
Jeremy, man, I'll tell you, you've been on just like an incredible journey, and you've been doing some amazing things, and I just appreciate the fact that you are one of the best resources out there for exposing people to alternative Christian options between Christian music and Under the Radar media. I mean, you guys are kind of the two resources that I'll go to find out like what's going on that I need to know about that people are mining for. So if you don't mind talking about that, and then your book. I don't want to get this wrong because I know it in my memory, but I need to read it. So it's Impolite Questions for a Generous God. If you can talk about that too, that would be awesome.
Yeah, man, thank you so much. Appreciate it. It is, I don't think I've ever talked about these couple things in a public forum like this. So, but I appreciate the chance to share a little bit about them. The book kind of folded or moved into the music resource. I like you guys. I grew up in the faith in the church. And one of the things that was difficult for me to comprehend was the fact that a lot of times when we're in group settings like this, or at a coffee shop, or wherever it is that we're hanging out with our other, Christian friends, the conversations sounded different than they do at church, which part of that's perfectly fine. They're different forums and things, but there are things that are said when you're with your friends of the faith that you'd be afraid to share with the body of Christ. And some of that is okay because you need to be able to have that connection with your close friends. But some of it needs to be shared. We need to be willing to ask God. One of the things that I feel passionate about is that nothing's hidden from God, right? I mean, we all know that. Even my disbelief in him is not hidden from him. So why not share it with him? I feel like that's the best way for me to find growth and to move forward and grow as a person in my faith. So that's kind of what Impolite Questions, that's the book, for a generous God. And they're parables, they're not specific questions, but hopefully you get to the answer through kind of Chuck Klosterman, David Sedaris, essay-ish kind of thing. So if you're not into that, then don't worry about it. It's very left of the dial as well. But anyway, one of the chapters in that was Why Does Christian Music Suck? Which it was not originally titled that. It was Why Christian Music Does Not Suck. Because I'm a passionate follower of Christian music. I love it. And while I wasn't always that way, but through my time as an editor and as a listener to Christian music, it won me over. It gave me a voice for my prayers. However, I also have been a little bit disenchanted with some of the stuff that you hear, that a lot of people hear. And so I went on a quest to start finding music that would be my natural prayer language. I actually really believe in the Christian music industry, both mainstream and independent. I just am bent towards independent types of stuff. So what I wanted to do was start curating, collecting things that I thought my friends, maybe you guys, bands and artists that I think that kind of fit that mold, so that there's a place for people who were similar to me could sing a new song from their hearts that is a prayer that just matches kind of their musical bent. Because I believe that music, obviously, it reveals and expresses some of our deepest core, our deepest core values. And so when you're able to sing in your musical language, it will change the world. I honestly believe that. So that chapter of the book kind of unfolded into this website that you were just talking about, mychristianmusic.com. But that's what I am doing. Those are both labors of love. But I'd love to talk to you guys there. I'm a new dad. That's my true vocation right now. My baby's 6 months old. My wife teaches me new things every day. We're growing together as a family. So that's kind of my big passion as well right now. So they may be watching. He may be crying. I'm not sure.
Well, thank your wife for sharing you with us tonight.
I will.
It's just a huge blessing, man. Well, I think that's pretty much it, guys. I think we're gonna wrap things up here. Just gonna thank you guys. Thank you all for being here, and sharing this time with me. I actually had always wanted to have like this kind of like culmination of a celebration of a important like kind of endeavor in my life. So to have it shared amongst friends like this and to do it, it's like one of the most special memories of my life, actually, So I appreciate you guys doing it tonight. And to you guys out there, appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. I want to thank Emphasis Films for going ahead and hosting us tonight here. If you're in Nashville and you want to produce an event like this, or you want to share some Facebook Live or have video production or photo production, they didn't ask me to plug this, but I'm doing it anyway. So just find them on Instagram and get connected to them. They're doing great work here in Nashville, and I appreciate them very much. Also want to thank, again, MikeChristianMusic.com for doing a review. I want to thank UTR Media for the interview. I want to thank Altarwork and also thegoodfriday.com for all the coverage that you all have been given the table. Thank all my family at Old Bear Records and my wife and my son. If you're watching, I love you guys very much, and thanks for taking this journey with me too. Boy.
Can I say something that you're not saying right now?
Sure.
The best thing you can do for Ian right now and this music that God has inspired in him is share it on social media. Number one, share it. If you use Spotify, go share it there. If you use Apple Music, go share it. Also, be thinking about Christmas for next year. Order the physical copies for your friends and family. That's a way you can support his ministry, and that's a way that you can ensure that you're going to hear another Ian record. So support him and support his music, support the art, because that is how we can move. That's what we're called to, is to move the kingdom forward through the craft and art that he's given us. So yeah, support this. Do it. Go share it.
Man,
Yeah.
Invest in it.
You will
Thanks,
not be
David.
disappointed.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
You will not be, I don't know, you will be inspired if you listen to this album. So
Yep.
we can't say anymore.
man,
Good stuff.
thank you guys. Well, I'm just gonna. I didn't intend to do this, but I feel led to, so I'm just gonna close it out with a prayer for you guys. If there's anybody that's watching that doesn't know Jesus and is, I guess, intrigued with the person of Christ. Yeah, I just want to pray for you. You know, if you've even grown up in the church and you've been hurt in the church and moved away from it, you know, I want to pray for you too. And if you just want to reach out to me personally and say, what is all this that's happened to you? I remember you 20 years ago when you were a screaming, stage diving, you know, guitar playing guy. And I'd love to have that conversation with you too. So just going to pray for you as we close out, and appreciate you guys for tuning in. So, Lord, thank you this night for all the people that joined into this broadcast. I pray that you hopefully somehow in some way have been able to engage with the people through our conversation, through these songs, through this time together. You know who's on the other side of that camera lens. You know who's on the other side of that computer screen. Lord, just pray that you reveal yourself even more deeply to them. And if there's anybody waning in their faith, anybody that just needed encouragement as an artist, as a creative, as a Christian, as a mom, as a child, whatever that it is, Lord, would you just meet them at their needs tonight and touch them, Father, in their hearts and in the way that only you can. So we thank you for this, and we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So thanks again for tuning in, and hope to actually meet you in person sometime. All right. Peace out.
Nice job.
Yep.